And welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. Remember when I was talking about all the different starfighters for the original Star Wars trilogy, X-Wing, TIE Fighter, etc.? I did mention there was kind of an honorary mention. That's this vehicle, the Rebel Snowspeeder from The Empire Strikes Back. This vehicle is really, really cool, and I kind of felt I should have mentioned it when I talked about those other ships. But the downside is this was an aircraft, not a spacecraft, and I didn't think it was sort of, I don't know, it didn't really belong in the starship categories that I was talking about. So I just thought, no, let's make the Snowspeeder have an honorary mention in its own right. As I was playing Star Wars Battlefront there on my retweaking my TV video, it reminded me that, yeah, I haven't really talked about The Empire Strikes Back much. And there's a reason for that. There really aren't that many big battle sequences. There's just the one on Hoth. And the Snowspeeder is the vehicle that stars in that sequence. So I just thought, yeah, okay, let's talk about it as an honorary mention. It deserves its own separate category, separate video. So, what can we say about the Snowspeeder? Well, from what I gather, and there's a lot of rumors I'm going to be talking about here, so I'm sure somebody can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But according to various sources, Joe Johnston had kind of in the early, in the pre-production or the production stages of The Empire Strikes Back, he was coming up with an idea of a vehicle that was a combination of the X-Wing and the Y-Wing. I guess the logic was that the rebels may have been on the run and so therefore scavenging parts, and for whatever reason he just thought, well, let's have a vehicle that combines X-Wing and Y-Wing together as out of spare parts, I suppose. And this vehicle kind of, I see where he was going with it. I mean, if you look at it closely, it almost resembles the cockpit of the Y-Wing. I mean, I see similarities there in sort of the design and the shape. And it also, if you remember from my Y-Wing video, the original idea of this was that it would have two, like the main pilot and then a gunner, remember? Well, that's what the Snowspeeder has. It has a pilot and a gunner. Also, you know, there's sort of similar lines here that I can see. There was actually, also when I talked about this in the Y-Wing, the Star Wars Christmas special had a sequence where Luke and R2 and 3PO are down on a planet, and this whole section ejected off and was like its own little escape pod. And if you take that concept, that is kind of what the Snowspeeder is, if you really think about it. Now, according to the expanded universe or various sources online, the Snowspeeder, the Incom T-47, was supposedly a cargo aircraft that would fly around and move freight left, right, and center. And I don't know. According to some sources, the idea was that the harpoon on the back was actually used to snag cargo containers or something. I don't know. I've talked about it in the past, how I don't put a lot of faith in that expanded universe stuff, but that's kind of the story that's out there, and yeah, that's fine. I do think though that the idea of it actually being born from the Y-Wing cockpit, that kind of makes sense to me. The toy is really, really cool. I mean, it has great detail on it. You can, of course, put two pilots in there. I'm going to talk about something that I have a question about that in a sec. There are indications of where the air flaps or the ailerons were that allowed it to steer, but you can't actually lift those. Oh, I just noticed I'm missing the two little backs of the gun. I'm going to have to look for those. Anyway, yeah, and you know, here's like a couple flaps here that might move. The harpoon gun does fire, or at least moves back and forth, and you can detach the harpoon. You don't have very much of a cord, though, so I don't think you're going to be downing any AT-ATs anytime soon. Going to talk about that again in a moment. What else can I say? Yeah, it's got some really nice details, and a really nice feature is the fact that you can get two pilots in the back. You know, one in the back and one in the front. I think they really did a good job there. some of the questions that I have. Well, how can I do this? I'm going to insert a picture or two here of the Snowspeeder as it appears in the film. In fact, I'm going to just move it here, try and get you a profile view. Here is a scene, here is the Snowspeeder in the film. Here's an actual frame from Empire Strikes Back. And what I want you to pay attention to is the size of the pilot. Now, maybe I need to tilt that up a little bit there, but look at how small the pilot is in comparison here to how he looked in that shot. I mean, it looked to me like the Snowspeeder in the movie was a smaller vehicle than this toy is, and I think this might be the one time that Kenner actually made the vehicle larger than it appears in the film. Almost every other vehicle is definitely smaller, whether it be the TIE Fighter, the X-Wing, the Millennium Falcon being the biggest example of that. This one is actually larger, I think. If you go to, if you do some various research of how big the Snowspeeder was supposed to be, it says it's 5.3 meters, or roughly 17.5 feet from front to back. Now, let's just do a little comparison. If our Rebel pilot here is 1.8 meters, or let's say he's roughly 6 feet tall, that means there would be 3 of these guys from front to back. And if I tilt it up here, I'll tell you what, no, instead of tilting it up, let's turn this sideways here again, just like in that previous shot. And we'll lie our Rebel pilot on his side. So, there's roughly from the flaps to there, 6 feet. There's the other 6 feet, so that's 12. Let me get my hand out of the way. There's 12. And there's another 6 feet. That's 18, and we're not even at the edge of the gun here. So, I mean, unless it means to this point. But I remember in The Empire Strikes Back, let's just rotate it around here. It's just like in the film. You remember Luke kind of jumps in and says to Dak, you know, or Dak says, "I'm ready to take on the Empire myself," and Lucas says, "Yeah, I know what you mean." And away they go. It seemed like a much smaller vehicle, so I don't know. This is probably one of those, like I say, rare times that the vehicle is a lot larger than the one in the film. And speaking of Luke getting into his Snowspeeder, that does bring me to a part of the introduction of the Snowspeeders that I'm not entirely sure about. Remember when I was talking about the Y-Wing, why did they have a secondary vehicle when you could have just had your X-Wings, you know, the one vehicle to introduce for the good guys? There's kind of a similar thing with the Snowspeeder, and this could be just George Lucas's style. Maybe he just has that much depth in the Star Wars universe that he just thinks, okay, yeah, I'm going to not just do the proverbial, well, there's one aircraft and one spacecraft for the good guys, and similarly for the bad guys. I'm going to flesh out my universe and have tauntauns and other kinds of things that go on. That could definitely be, and I could be completely wrong here, but I always wondered at the beginning of The Empire Strikes Back, why were the Snowspeeders not introduced initially? Like, why is there the whole bit with the tauntauns at first? Now, there's a line of dialogue where, as Han is about to go out into the darkness on his tauntaun, one of the rebels, or he asks one of the rebels, are the speeders ready yet? And the rebel commander says, we're having some trouble adapting them to the cold. So there's a little line of dialogue thrown in there to show, well, no, we need to go out on tauntauns because these Snowspeeders aren't ready yet. Seemed like an odd choice, but okay. I think why that was actually in the script, and this is completely based on old rumors and things that were read in magazines back when the Empire Strikes Back first came out in 1980. As you know, Mark Hamill had a car accident after the first film, and when he would appear at talk shows and things after the success of the very first movie, people would kind of look oddly at him like, you don't look like you do in the film, and he, often said his reply was, "Oh, I was in a lightsaber duel," that kind of jokey kind of stuff. I think in order to explain Luke's slightly different appearance, the script was written in a way that Luke has to get attacked. It also speaks well to the Star Wars tradition of kind of that James Bond opening sequence. Our hero is in peril right off the bat. So we'll get him attacked by a Wampa. So we have Luke out on his Tauntaun. He gets attacked by the Wampa. Han rescues him. The Snowspeeders aren't ready yet. They bring him back. He goes through the back to rejuvenation, and his face is reconstructed, like these pictures show here. I suspect that's actually why we didn't see the Snowspeeders right off the bat. They needed to come up with an explanation for Mark Hamill's appearance to be different, and they needed Luke on foot out in the wilderness to get attacked. If he was in one of these Snowspeeders, there's not much of a chance the Wampa could have got to him. So I think that's what was going on there. Well, there isn't a heck of a lot more I can say about the Snowspeeder toy itself. I've made some slight changes here. When it was originally in its packaging, these guns actually were rotated this way. You see there's like a little shiny gap in there? That's like a little tube that a bulb will shine lights down. And when you press the fire button, which is a little recessed thing there, this bulb would pulse on and off, and it would sort of light up in here to show, oh, you're firing your cannons. Personally, I think for my sitting on my shelf, I kind of like it looking like that because that doesn't look like a toy that way. It looks like an actual vehicle. That's why I did that. And yeah, it's a really great toy, and the Snowspeeder is a very important part of The Empire Strikes Back, and therefore does deserve some mention. So just wanted to give it its moment in the spotlight, since I did so for all the other vehicles, the other starships. Anyway, that's it. Until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.